Close your eyes and listen to the waves. The sea is endless, restless, always moving. Beneath its surface, stories rise and fall like tides. Among them is one of Poseidon, lord of oceans and storms. But he is not only the god of the sea, he is also the master of horses, wild and untamed. His trident strikes, and waves crash like galloping hooves. Foam curls, white and fierce, like the mane of a stallion. Legends say the first horse was born from his power, a creature of beauty, strength, and divine freedom. From that moment, horses carried more than mortal weight. They carried the echo of the sea, the spirit of Poseidon. Every gallop was a wave breaking on distant shores. Every snort of breath a whisper of ancient tides. Tonight we follow that legend back through time. We travel into myths where gods walk beside mortals. We seek the sacred horses, guardians of balance and grace. They run through oceans, through dreams, through memory itself. Stay with me as the story unfolds beneath the sound of the sea. Long ago, the world was still young, and silence hung heavy over land and sea. The gods looked down upon the earth, shaping rivers, forests, and mountains with their will. Among them stood Poseidon, lord of the vast oceans, his trident gleaming with untamed force. He was restless, a god of movement, of waves that could never be still. He longed to create something powerful, swift, and free like the sea itself. One day, he struck the earth with his mighty trident, and the ground shuddered. From the crack of stone and the breath of waves, a new creature emerged. It was not of the sea, nor fully of the land, but of both worlds combined. A horse, shining like polished bronze, with eyes that carried the depth of oceans. Its mane flowed like rolling surf, white and alive with the whisper of tides. Its hooves struck the ground like thunder, echoing storms across open plains. The gods marveled, for no such creature had walked the earth before that moment. Poseidon looked upon his creation with pride, calling it a gift born of his essence. The horse bowed its head, strong yet gentle, as though it knew it carried divinity. From then on, horses were tied forever to Poseidon, the god of sea and storms. They were sacred, symbols of freedom, and vessels of both grace and wild spirit. Mortals would come to see them not as beasts, but as companions of destiny. To ride a horse was to touch the breath of the sea, to feel waves beneath hooves. Every gallop was a hymn to Poseidon, every leap a reminder of divine origin. The first horse roamed across plains, rivers, and hills, leaving trails of wonder. It became the ancestor of all horses, carrying within it the spark of immortality. Children of this sacred creature spread across the lands, carrying strength to humankind. Farmers used them to plow fields, travelers to cross rivers, and kings to rule. Yet none forgot their source, the god who gave them form and purpose. In ancient songs, poets told of the first horse rising from earth and sea. They compared its mane to waves, its stride to tides, its call to thunder. Horses became more than animals. They were bridges between mortals and the divine. Through them, people felt closer to Poseidon, closer to the mystery of creation. Even now, when hooves strike the earth, echoes of that first moment resound. The legend says Poseidon still watches, his presence felt in every breath of a horse. For in their eyes glimmers the sea, and in their hearts beats the storm. And thus, the birth of horses was not mere creation, but a gift of eternity. Poseidon was not only the god of horses, but above all the sovereign of the sea. His kingdom stretched endlessly, with waves as his walls and tides as his messengers. Every current, every swell, every storm was an echo of his restless spirit. He ruled the oceans with a mixture of majesty and unpredictability. To mortals, he was both protector and destroyer. kind father and merciless judge. Sailors prayed to him before journeys, begging calm waters and guiding winds. Yet they feared him too, for a single frown could summon storms to crush fleets. Poseidon's trident was more than a weapon. It was the key to his dominion. With it, he stirred oceans, raised islands, and shattered cliffs with divine force. But his power was not only destructive, it was also creative. The sea nurtured life, filled nets with fish, and carried ships to distant shores. Poseidon was balance itself, a god who embodied the wild rhythm of existence. He loved the vastness of his domain, yet he longed for expression beyond waves. That desire led him to gift the horse to the world, a mirror of his essence. The horse embodied freedom, strength, and speed, just as the sea embodied depth and power. Both were restless, both untamed, and both tied to Poseidon's eternal spirit. This dual nature of Poseidon was remembered in every myth that bore his name. He was never simple, never one-sided, but layered like the ocean's shifting tides. His anger could crush cities, but his blessing could bring harvest and prosperity. When horses galloped across plains, mortals said they carried echoes of waves. When waves crashed on rocks, they swore it sounded like hooves on stone. The connection between sea and horse was not accidental, but divine truth. Priests built temples near coasts and rivers to honor both aspects of the god. Some offered salt water and fish, others sacrificed fine horses in solemn rituals. All acts sought to recognize Poseidon's dual throne, ocean depths and earthly plains. To worship him was to respect both chaos and calm, both storm and peace. Ancient poets described him as the embodiment of contradiction. His beard flowed like sea foam. His eyes shone with stormlight. His presence filled with awe. Mortals who defied him learned his wrath quickly. Yet those who honored him rode safely, their ships protected, their horses swift. Poseidon's nature was a lesson. Power is never gentle, yet it gives as much as it takes. The sea fed nations, horses carried empires. Both were Poseidon's eternal gifts. And so, in every crashing wave and every galloping steed, his presence remains. The god of the sea and horses is not distant but woven into the world. To understand him is to understand that life itself is both tempest and tide. This is why Poseidon is remembered not just as ruler, but as balance incarnate. His story teaches that strength without chaos is an illusion, and peace without power cannot endure. Thus, the dual throne of Poseidon endures forever in myth and memory. Poseidon's chariot was a vision of power that belonged not to earth, but to realms between sky and sea. It was made of shining bronze, polished so brightly it reflected the restless light of the waves. The wheels turned without sound, gliding over water as if sea foam itself carried them forward. 4 immortal horses drew the chariot, each a living storm bound in the shape of a steed. Their manes flowed like rolling tides, and their eyes shone with sparks of lightning. When they galloped, the sea parted, leaving a shining road across the water's skin. Their hooves did not sink. They struck the surface as if it were solid ground. Wherever Poseidon rode, thunder echoed, and the ocean itself bowed to his command. These divine horses were unlike any creature known to mortals or even other gods. They were born of sea and sky, carrying both calm breeze and roaring storm in their veins. Poets claimed their breath was mist, rising like clouds above the horizon. Others swore their neighs rolled across oceans like waves crashing on distant shores. Sailors who glimpsed the chariot spoke of shimmering silhouettes racing the moon. They believed it was a sign of either great fortune or impending wrath. If Poseidon's horses appeared gentle, sailors felt hope fill their sails. But if their gallop raged with fury, hearts trembled with fear of storms to come. Legend said the horses needed no reins, for they understood Poseidon's will directly. A glance, a thought, a silent command. At once they obeyed, bound by eternal loyalty. The bond between god and steed was deeper than words, a unity of power and spirit. Together they represented control over both chaos and freedom. When Poseidon held the trident high, the horses surged forward, unstoppable as tides. No mountain, no fortress, no wave could resist the chariot's furious charge. Yet there was beauty too, for the chariot was not only a tool of war, it was also a symbol of passage, carrying Poseidon to bless coasts and sacred temples. Priests spoke of the horses as messengers of divine presence. When they passed, waters grew calm, and fish swam in abundance. When they thundered with anger, storms rose and ships vanished beneath the waves. The duality of blessing and curse followed always in their wake. To mortals, the chariot was proof that Poseidon was both near and unreachable. He could travel vast distances in moments, linking oceans like rivers of one body. The horses, eternal and untamed, became living symbols of divine speed and freedom. Some myths say they were gifts from the union of sea gods and sky winds. Others claimed they were born at the dawn of time before earth and sky were divided. But all agreed they were sacred, beyond mortal reach, beyond mortal mastery. Even kings who bred fine horses knew theirs were but shadows of Poseidon's steeds. Thus, the chariot remained an eternal image of divine majesty. When waves crash today and winds howl across the sea, some still imagine the chariot. Its bronze frame flashing, its horses blazing, its god steering across endless waters. The vision lingers not only as myth, but as timeless truth of Poseidon's eternal ride. In the deep waters where myths are born, creatures unlike any others swam beside Poseidon's realm. They were called hippocamps, half horse, half fish, sacred beings tied to the mysteries of the sea. Their heads rose proudly like noble steeds, but their bodies flowed into the glistening tails of fish. With shining scales and flowing fins, they glided through waves as swiftly as dolphins at play. Legends describe their manes as streams of silver, drifting in the water like ribbons of light. Their eyes reflected both calm seas and raging storms, holding the secrets of the ocean's heart. Fishermen told stories of seeing them leap high above the waves under a silver moon. When they splashed back down, the ocean roared with joy, as if welcoming its own children. Some said hippocamps carried Poseidon's messages across the seas faster than any wind. Others believed they guided lost sailors, pulling them toward safe harbors when hope was fading. But they could also vanish, leaving only whirlpools where they once had swum in harmony. Priests of Poseidon painted them on temple walls, symbols of divine speed and endless mystery. Their images appeared on coins, carvings, and mosaics, reminders of the gods' unseen companions. To poets, hippocamps embodied the union of freedom on land and fluidity in water. They showed that nature itself could merge opposites and create beauty beyond imagination. In myth, Poseidon often rode not only his chariot of immortal horses, but also hippocamps. When storms rose too wild for even horses to bear, these sea steeds carried him with ease. Their tails lashed like waves, propelling them forward faster than thunder across the horizon. To watch them was to see the sea take shape, alive and unbound. Their presence blurred the line between reality and dream, mortal and divine. Children who listened to sailors' tales believed hippocamps lived in hidden caves of coral. They imagined them playing in gardens of seaweed, guarded by nymphs of the deep. Waves crashing on rocks were thought to be the sound of their galloping tales. The sea's foam, some said, was born from their wild leaps across the water. Hippocamps also became symbols of journeys, guiding spirits safely across the unknown sea of a life. They reminded mortals that courage could be found even in the most mysterious depths. Temples dedicated to Poseidon often held sacrifices in their honor. Prayers whispered for safe voyages. Sailors painted hippocamps on their ships, hoping to earn favor and protection on long travels. Myths claim they were gentle with the innocent, yet fierce when angered by arrogance. No spear could pierce their scales, for the sea itself clothed them in divine armor. Those who harmed them risked storms, for Poseidon punished disrespect toward his sacred creatures. And yet, many believed simply seeing a hippocamp was a blessing, a promise of safe return. They embodied hope, mystery, and the eternal link between land's freedom and sea's vast embrace. Even today, when waves shimmer and shadows flicker below, some whisper they still swim there. The hippocamps remain eternal symbols of Poseidon's world, untamed, divine, and forever alive in story. The stories of Poseidon are not only about the sea or the sacred horses that carried his glory. There was also the tale of contests, where gods and mortals sought to claim power through gifts to cities. One of the greatest contests was between Poseidon and Athena, both desiring the devotion of Athens. The gods gathered on the Acropolis to witness, and mortals watched in awe, fearing to speak aloud. Poseidon stepped forward first, striking his mighty trident into the dry rock of the hill. From the crack burst a fountain of salt water, rushing out with the roar of the sea. The water glittered under the sun, a symbol of Poseidon's command over oceans and storms. Yet the people tasted it, and its brine burned their tongues, reminding them of the sea's fury. Then Athena approached with calm grace, holding in her hands a branch from an olive tree. She planted it into the earth, and it grew strong, its leaves silver in the bright air. The tree offered food, oil, wood, and shade, gifts of peace and prosperity to the people. The gods murmured, weighing the worth of the gifts, power of the sea against fruit of the land. Zeus declared the judgment. The olive tree was more precious than the salt spring of Poseidon. Athena won the contest, and the city was named for her, forever carrying her wisdom. Poseidon's anger shook the ground, and the sea crashed violently against the shores of Attica. But beneath his fury was respect, for Athena's gift revealed foresight and care for mortal life. Still, Poseidon's mark remained, for the salt spring continued to flow near the Parthenon temple. The people honored both gods, knowing the sea's might was as vital as the earth's bounty. In later tales, Poseidon was not only rival, but also protector, guiding ships from Athens to far lands. Sailors prayed to him, pouring wine into the waters, seeking favor from the god they once denied. The contest became more than myth. It was a lesson about choice, value, and lasting legacy. The sea offers power and reach, but the land offers stability and sustenance to human lives. Together, both forces shaped Athens, a city born of wisdom, but tied forever to the ocean. Temples stood in his honor, so that Poseidon's pride was soothed and his strength respected. Priests reminded the people that without him, their ships would be lost and trade would collapse. Thus, the contest was not truly a defeat, but a balance of divine gifts for mortal survival. The olive tree and the saltwater spring stood side by side, eternal symbols of the gods. Travelers spoke of them as proof that gods walked the earth and left their marks on stone. Poets sang of the moment when power met wisdom, and the world saw what truly mattered. And so Poseidon's tale in Athens endured, not as a loss, but but as a lesson of harmony. For in myth, even rivalry between gods becomes a story of balance that shapes human destiny. In myths, Poseidon's horses were not only beasts of strength, but sacred companions gifted to chosen heroes. One such hero was Bellerophon, who sought to tame the winged horse Pegasus, a creature born from divine blood. The horse was wild, swift as the wind, and no mortal hand could place a bridle upon its head. Guided by Athena's wisdom and Poseidon's hidden blessing, Bellerophon found the horse by a clear, flowing spring. He placed upon Pegasus a golden bridle, and the horse bowed its head as if to a friend. With this gift, the hero rode across the sky, fighting monsters and proving courage in the face of chaos. Another tale speaks of Pelops, a mortal prince who sought victory in a chariot race to win his bride. Poseidon, favoring him, gifted horses of fire, swift beyond any mortal team, burning with divine energy. With these steeds, Pelops triumphed, his fame echoing through the land and his line founding dynasties of kings. The horses in these stories were more than gifts. They were symbols of Poseidon's bond with mortals. They represented the trust between gods and men, a fragile balance of power, respect, and destiny. To ride a divine horse was to carry a piece of the sea's wild spirit upon the land. It was to harness the waves, the storms, the freedom that Poseidon alone could bestow upon the brave. Horses given by the god were both a blessing and a test, for not all could bear their might. A mortal too proud would fall, for the steeds demanded humility, courage, and honor in every command. Those who rode with respect found glory, while those who sought only pride faced ruin and despair. The myths whisper that in the sound of hooves striking stone, one can still hear the sea's roar. Each gallop was like a wave breaking, carrying mortals closer to the realm of gods with every stride. The heroes who received these horses became legends, remembered not only for strength, but for divine favor. Sailors told of them as omens, and kings envied them, for no throne was firmer than a god's gift. Even in temples, statues of horses stood beside Poseidon's trident, carved as if alive with eternal motion. Priests reminded the faithful that these creatures were not mere animals, but messengers of Poseidon's will. To care for them was to honor the god. To betray them was to invite the sea's wrath. Generations of poets sang of fiery steeds, winged stallions, and heroes who rode between sea and sky. And so the legacy endured, teaching that gifts of gods are powerful, but demand wisdom to be used well. In every tale, Poseidon's horses shine as more than beasts. They are bridges between divine power and human fate. Their story is not only of speed and strength, but of the sacred bond between the eternal and the mortal. Even now, their spirit lingers in the restless waves and the thundering hooves that echo through the earth. In ancient times, rituals for Poseidon's horses were woven into the rhythm of life by sea and land. At sacred festivals, people gathered near temples built close to shores, where waves touched stone altars. The sound of the surf was like a hymn, a reminder of the god's eternal power and presence. Priests led processions with garlands of seaweed, olive branches, and fragrant herbs carried high in solemn silence. Horses, brushed until their coats shone, were led forward, adorned with ribbons of blue, green, and gold. Each step of the animals echoed reverence, their hooves striking the ground like drums of a divine song. Sacrifices were not always of life, but often of offerings, honey, wine, and barley scattered to the sea. Fishermen poured water from their nets, farmers gave grain, sailors laid coral, all honoring the god's horses. Some legends tell of chariot races held in Poseidon's honor, where horses ran as if touched by divinity. The speed of the racers was believed to stir winds, bringing rain or guiding ships toward safe harbors. Winners were crowned not only with laurel, but with blessings, their victory tied to Poseidon's unseen hand. At the temple in Corinth, rituals were more secret, where priests whispered to statues of sea-born steeds. They believed the horses carried prayers across waves, delivering them straight into the ears of the god. In Thessaly, plains rich with horses, festivals lasted days, with feasts, songs, and contests of strength and skill. Children listened wide-eyed to stories of winged stallions and fiery steeds given to heroes long ago. The rituals were not only acts of worship, but bridges between mortals and the mysteries of the sea. To groom a horse before the altar was to honor Poseidon, as if calming both storm and tide. The brushstrokes carried prayers for safety, for fertility of fields, and for journeys across uncertain waters. Every neigh, every stamp of a hoof was thought to echo a response from the god himself. Worshippers felt that in the horse's gaze, they could glimpse the depth of oceans and the sky. When storms rose, people turned to the sacred horses, asking them to intercede with their divine master. Festivals ended with processions to the shoreline, where horses were led into the surf to bathe. The waves broke around their legs, foam clinging like garlands, uniting the creatures with their sea-born spirit. Priests cast libations into the waters, calling Poseidon to bless the bond between man and horse. The sea accepted offerings, carrying them away, leaving believers with hope and peace in their hearts. These rituals, though ancient, lived on in memory, shaping how mortals saw the sacred role of horses. Not just beasts of burden, but bridges of faith, symbols of harmony between the sea and the earth. Each rite taught reverence, patience, and humility, lessons drawn from Poseidon's realm and his eternal herd. And so the stories tell us that in every prayer offered, the god's horses still carry the words. Waves crash against the shore, their white crests rising like wild horses racing into the wind. The ancients saw this, and they believed the sea itself carried the spirit of Poseidon's sacred herd. Every breaker galloped forward, hooves of foam pounding, manes of spray tossed high under the endless sky. To them, the ocean was not empty water, but a living herd guided by the god's unseen hand. Each wave bore the strength of stallions, restless, never still, each tide a pulse of divine energy. Sailors swore that when storms raged, they heard neighs hidden in the thunder rolling across the sea. The roar of waves was like a chorus, a hymn of horses charging toward distant horizons. Foam scattered on rocks was called the breath of steeds, the mark of their eternal passage. At dawn, when waters shimmered gold, people said Poseidon's horses drank light and ran beneath the surface. At dusk, when waves darkened, they vanished into the deep, returning to stables hidden in the abyss. Poets compared the curve of waves to the arch of a horse's neck, strong, graceful, and untamed. Fishermen prayed not to the sea alone, but to the herd galloping beneath its silver skin. Each crest was a guardian, each trough a test, reminding mortals of the sea's gift and peril. Children listened to stories where the tide carried riders upon steeds of foam to distant lands. They dreamed of galloping over waves, hooves leaving trails of light across the restless waters. To gaze at the ocean was to see the eternal race. No start, no finish, only motion. The horses of Poseidon were symbols of freedom, for no chain could bind waves, no wall could stop tides. Their rhythm was steady, yet wild, a reminder that life flows, breaks, and returns like the sea. Even in calm, The water whispered, its soft ripples like gentle steps of foals beside their mothers. Priests said that Poseidon's herd carried souls safely across the water from one shore to another. The living offered prayers, hoping the divine steeds would grant calm passage on uncertain voyages. The waves themselves became sacred texts, written in motion, read in sound, retold by each generation. Scholars taught that to understand the sea was to understand the horses that leapt upon its skin. In art, waves were painted not just as water, but as flowing manes, surging with strength. Statues carved in stone showed horses rising from surf, eternal symbols of divine presence. For the ancients, every journey began with respect, bowing to the herd hidden in the waves. Even now, when we stand by the sea, the illusion remains. The sound still stirs the heart. Waves rise, crash, and fall, like horses that never rest, forever galloping beneath the command of Poseidon. Their presence lingers, not just in myth, but in the rhythm of the world's oceans. And so the sacred horses live on, racing endlessly across the horizon, carrying the voice of the sea. The sea was a mirror, and in its shifting glass, the ancients saw shapes that echoed horses in motion. Every ripple curved like a mane, every spray of foam like breath rising from the nostrils of a steed. Waves rolled in rhythm, their crash upon the shore like galloping hooves pounding an endless track. This was no accident to them, but the hand of Poseidon writing poetry upon the surface of the deep. The tide pulled forward, then retreated. A dance like horses circling, fierce yet graceful, bound yet free. Storms told their own stories. Thunder and lightning becoming whips and sparks guiding the herd across the heavens. Each wave became a line of verse, each crest a stanza, each breaker a hymn to the god. Travelers spoke of seas that whispered, their murmurs weaving songs of horses racing beyond mortal sight. Priests described the ocean as a scroll, waves as ink, carrying the words of Poseidon's eternal speech. To read the sea was to read the god, and to hear its roar was to hear the herd. Poets imagined the horizon as a gate where horses of light broke through, born from sea and sky. Painters brushed waves like flowing manes, curves alive with motion, carrying the weight of myth and memory. Even the silence of a calm sea was a story, like resting horses breathing slow in the dark. The foam glowed white as marble, sculpted by the wind into fleeting shapes that vanished as they formed. Each pattern was a message, fleeting yet eternal, reminding mortals of beauty found in constant change. Children listened to elders who told them the sea wrote songs for those with patience to hear. Fishermen at dawn swore the tide hummed, a deep chant that matched the rhythm of their hearts. They believed Poseidon's herd spoke through the ocean, guiding them home or warning them of danger ahead. To them, the sea was never mute. It was a book always turning, a story never ending. Scholars later said the metaphors were truth, disguised as myth, for the sea indeed shaped human destiny. Its moods inspired verse, its storms carved memory, its calm offered peace that echoed in prayers and songs. The horses were not just beasts, but symbols of power, of freedom, of the eternal cycle of return. As waves met cliffs, they sang, a thunderous hymn etched into stone, lasting longer than mortal lives. Temples rose by the sea, their columns echoing the surge and fall of the tide itself. Rituals honored not just water, but the horses imagined within, divine steeds racing through eternity. And so, the ocean remained a stage where myth, art, and faith braided into one endless performance. Even today, when we stand by the shore, the same vision rises if we listen with care. The sea becomes a poem, each wave a word, each crash a heartbeat, each whisper a song, The sacred horses of Poseidon are still there, not in flesh, but in rhythm, motion, and memory. They run forever across the horizon, carrying the voice of the deep, a tale without end. The myths of Poseidon's horses were not only tales of gods, but lessons carved deep into the heart of time. They taught mortals that power, like the sea, was vast, unpredictable, and always demanding respect and humility. To ride a divine horse was to accept both gift and burden, for such a steed carried more than mortal weight. It carried the voice of the god, the echo of waves, the reminder that strength must be tempered by wisdom. Heroes who received these horses were tested not in battle alone, but in the choices they made each day. Bellerophon, with Pegasus, rose high into the sky, yet fell when pride carried him beyond the bounds of fate. Pelops, gifted with divine horses, won his bride, but his tale also warned of oaths broken and promises betrayed. These myths were not warnings alone. They were mirrors, asking mortals to see themselves in the gods' restless herd. Each story whispered that freedom is sacred, but freedom without balance can destroy the rider and the road alike. The horse was more than an animal. It was the soul of motion, freedom, and the bond between heaven and earth. In every gallop, mortals heard thunder. In every neigh, they imagined the storm. In every breath, the sea itself. The herd of Poseidon was eternal, reminding mortals of both the power they seek and the limits they must respect. Sailors prayed to the god not only for calm seas, but for the courage to face storms with steady hearts. Farmers blessed their fields with horse tracks, hoping for fertility, strength, and endurance flowing from divine origins. Warriors dreamed of steeds that never tired, knowing that true victory came not from speed, but from harmony. The myths told that Poseidon's horses could not be mastered by force, only by trust and reverence. This truth echoed in temples, in poems, and in every tale where gods and mortals crossed paths with destiny. Priests reminded the faithful that a gift from the gods was not ownership, but stewardship bound by respect. To treat the sacred horse as mere beast was to invite ruin, as arrogance always called down divine wrath. But to honor it, to ride with humility, was to find a bridge between mortal fragility and eternal power. The sea itself taught the same lesson. Resist it, and you drown. Move with it, and you find safe passage. So too with the horses. Move against them, and you fall. Move with them, and you soar. Generations carried these teachings, weaving them into law, song, and ritual, until they became part of human memory. The myths survived not because they spoke of gods alone, but because they spoke of us, our hopes and flaws. They told us that strength without care is storm, but strength with wisdom is peace. They reminded us that freedom is precious, but freedom without balance is destruction. And they whispered that every wave, every gallop, every breath of the sea still carries these truths today. The sacred horses of Poseidon were never only about myth. They were about life, struggle, and the pursuit of harmony. They still run, unseen, reminding us that to live with power is to live with humility. And that is the legacy left by the god of the sea and his eternal herd. As our journey draws to a close, we step back from the myths and listen to the waves that still speak today. The sacred horses of Poseidon remain not only in legend, but in the rhythm of the sea that touches every shore. Each wave that rises is like a mane of foam, each crash a gallop, each retreat a breath of the god's herd. In these stories, we have walked with gods, watched heroes rise and fall, and heard the whispers of ancient ritual. But the deeper gift of myth is not the spectacle of power. It is the quiet truth hidden beneath every tale. The horses taught us that freedom is a flame, powerful and bright, but fragile if not carried with care. They showed us that strength is not measured in force alone, but in wisdom, patience, and harmony with nature. Poseidon himself was storm and calm, wrath and blessing, destruction and creation, always demanding balance from mortals. In his horses, he left a living metaphor of movement, reminding us to keep pace with life, not fight against it. For the sea does not yield to anger, nor do horses bow to cruelty. They answer only to trust and respect. The myths remind us that arrogance leads to downfall, but humility opens paths beyond what we can imagine. Heroes like Bellerophon and Pelops are remembered not just for triumphs, but for choices that carried weight beyond their time. Each rider of a sacred horse carried a lesson for us. Gifts from the gods are bridges, not possessions. And when we forget this truth, the bridge collapses, leaving us adrift, as countless myths have shown. Yet when we honor it, we find not only safety, but wonder, a chance to glimpse the divine in the ordinary. The neigh of a horse becomes the roar of waves. The gallop becomes thunder, and the sea becomes memory. Generations after the myths were first told, their echoes still guide us, shaping art, song, and the way we dream. To this day, sailors still watch the sea with reverence. Farmers still bless the earth with horses. Poets still chase metaphors. In every culture touched by waves, in every path shaped by hooves, the mark of Poseidon's herd still lingers. The legacy is not only in the gods, but in us, in how we choose to live with power and freedom. Myth survives because it holds mirrors to our souls, showing us who we are and who we might become. And so the sacred horses gallop on across oceans of time, carrying lessons we still need, perhaps more than ever. They remind us that to move with life is to thrive, to resist it is to stumble, and to forget is to fall. Close your eyes, listen to the surf, and hear the herd running, eternal, unseen, but always present. They are not only Poseidon's horses now, they are ours, symbols of balance, humility, and the restless spirit of freedom. And as their gallop fades into the horizon, we leave this myth not with answers, but with a deeper understanding. The sea is never silent, and neither are the stories, for both live on in every heart that dares to listen.